Great to have you
Hmm.
as always. Paris, I know you said
Thank
that there's a
you.
lot to cover, so
Thank you.
without
Great
any
to be here.
further ado, let's go ahead and get this news started.
Let's just start off by saying hi to Monajun, the ultimate uniter, who's in Greece and watching us on a massive time delay. So Monajun, thank you so much for being here and continuing to unite us
Yeah.
on the other side of the world. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and it's not good news, unfortunately, Imanjun. The Islamic Republic has broken a new
I
human rights
didn't know that
record.
there's records to be broken
Are
in
you
this
aware?
regard, but I'm certainly not surprised if they are the ones breaking it.
Yeah, so according to the BBC, and I'm looking to the side because that's where there's notes, and Monajun says it's 3 a.m. Thank you for being here at 3 a.m. and hearing about murders that the Islamic regime is carrying out. So according to the BBC, the Islamic regime is second to China on basically carrying out executions. Excuse me. This year, they've been executing on average 10 individuals a week. So 10 Iranians have been killed every week on average since the month of January. And these are the numbers that are accounted for. We have to keep that in mind as well. These are the numbers that the Islamic regime is making public. We don't know what the true numbers are because we know there are individuals who are being killed, unjustly daily during protests, during interrogations. But what they're telling us is that it's on average 10 people, which means 209 people have been executed by the Islamic regime in Iran since the month of January. 40 people have been hanged in the past 10 days. Two more people were hanged this week, this time for blasphemy. So it's 2023 and people are still getting hanged for blasphemy. Youssef Mehdad and Sajrullah Fazeli, they were both arrested in May 2020 for being members of a Telegram chat group. You guys, they were members of a Telegram chat book discussing religion and basically critiquing it. So they were arrested. They've been in jail since, May 2020, and they were just hanged. By the way, May 8th, the day that they were hanged, is also the day that Farrokh Parsa was killed, and this, we're just going to do a bit of a culture note. She was executed by the Islamic regime when it was newly formed at the time. So this happened back in 1980. Farrokh Parsa, she was killed by firing squad. The charges against her were corruption on earth and spreading prostitution. So this corruption on earth and falsely killing people for absolutely no reason is not new. So to anyone who's not familiar with news about Iran, you may be hearing about protests or hanging people. We've been dealing with this for the past 44 years. And this woman, she was a physician, she was an educator, she was a parliamentarian. And under the Pahlavi monarchy, she was the first female cabinet minister as well. She was the mother of four. She was the minister of education. And after the revolution, the Islamic regime arrested her, charged her with corruption on earth, and killed her by firing squad. So again, this was in 1980, but as we can see, this pattern of killing people for absolutely no reason is being repeated.
What about details on other death sentences that unfortunately we've been hearing about?
Yeah, so Iran Wire has obtained copies of documents stating that Iran's Supreme Court has upheld the death sentences for three individuals. They're Majid Kazemi, Saeed Yaqoubi, and Saleh Mir Hashemi. And according to Iran Wire, the three men were arrested in connection with the death of a Basiji. Now, it's not confirmed, and to anyone watching, it was never confirmed that they actually killed the man. And there's actually groups that are providing legal advice to protesters who are saying that there's no evidence that's actually proving their guilt, and in fact, it's likely any sort of guilt was acquired through forced confession. So these individuals, can happen at any moment, unfortunately, for them. They have been transferred to solitary confinement. And again, if we could use their names, Majid Kazemi, Saeed Yaqoubi, and Saleh Mir Hashemi as hashtags, use their names, really use the hashtags, and hopefully we can save their lives. But at this point, the Islamic regime is setting
You would think that
records.
there's an organization globally, let's just call it like a United Nations Human Rights Watch, that would
Mhm.
perhaps police these type of inhumanities happening. But just when you want to hope that these type of organizations, first of all, exist, and second of all, actually do what you want them to do, what happened today that pretty much shocked all Iranians?
The Islamic regime has been appointed to a leadership position, a leadership role within the United Nations Human Rights Council. I'm sorry, and I know I'm using intonations, but it's beyond me. I know that a couple of months ago, so many Iranians were excited about signing a petition and removing the Islamic regime from the Women's Committee. Guys, there's nothing to get excited over. This is pretenses. That there was nothing to celebrate. As you can see, the United Nations does not care about Iranians or what it does with the regime. So the Islamic regime's ambassador to the United Nations, his name is Ali Bahraini, he's going to not only be present, he's leading. Do you understand this? The United Nations has invited the ambassador representing the Islamic regime at the United Nations to lead the session. And the session is about technology and the promotion of human rights. So if you missed the beginning of this segment, we spoke about how Youssef Mehdad and Sadrullah Fazeli, they were just hanged for using a Telegram chat group. If you're not familiar, the internet is intermittently shut off in Iran to prevent people from communicating, but yet somehow the Islamic regime's ambassador gets invited to the United Nations to lead a section on technology and the promotion of human rights.
Can you give us a quick note about ongoing protests?
Yes, weekly protests happen in Zahedan. To anybody who keeps saying, or when you hear people say, oh, the protests have died down, the protests never died down. There have been protests every week, every Friday in Zahedan, they happen. There are intermittent protests every single week since Mahsa Amini was unjustly murdered back in September. If you tune into this program, we count those protests for you every week. So please, let's stop saying that the protests have died down. They have not. They are sparse and they are led by different organizations, different union groups, but they have not died down. There was also yesterday on May 9th, the Iranian Teachers Association has rallied in different cities nationwide, again, risking arrest. And they are also protesting wages, working condition, and basically unpaid salaries. So they're also in dire situations. They've all shown up to work and they don't get paid. So protests are still happening. Let's continue amplifying the voices. And if you haven't seen it, search for it. If you Google it, the information is out there. So let's please stop diminishing, because in protest, people literally lose their lives. So let's not diminish the lives of the individuals who are literally putting themselves and their families on the line.
The regime has issued arrest warrants for dozens of former and present U.S. officials. Why and who is on their list?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a kicker, but this is the Islamic regime kind of trying to flex their muscles. The warrants are in connection with the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And on the list are former President Donald Trump, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and former head of CENTCOM, General Kenneth Franklin McKenzie. So if y'all know them, any of these guys, just tell them not to go to Iran. Like, they won't be welcome. They'll be arrested. That's the plan. The charges are, quote, involvement in an act of terror that led to homicide and action against Iran's domestic and external security and funding terrorism. And Fars News quotes an Islamic regime official who said judicial requests for cooperations were sent to 9 countries. So the Islamic regime is taking this very, very seriously. And the targeted countries are those who the Islamic regime believes played part in the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And the prosecutor says that they've summoned some 12,000 judicial documents which were collected against the defendants in this case. So they're taking it seriously. It's a bit of a kicker, but they're basically, if you guys remember, at the time of Qasem Soleimani's death, they had said that they were going to basically strike back at the regime, strike back at Israel and whoever took part. And they're basically left the doors open on what that would look like.
Last week, we spoke about the Islamic regime making concerning statements about selling the Persian Gulf islands of Kish and, was it Kish?
Yeah.
Wait, I want to pronounce it correctly. Okay, well, good. Okay.
Kish. There's people, like, depending on the local dialect, is Kish or Kish, depending on how individuals would pronounce it from where they
some of our historic sites have been put on sale too. Just say, like, imagine a national monument being put on sale. Like, just even saying it out loud sounds asinine. But why don't you tell me what's happening now with these recent historic sites?
Exactly. Like, think of how many historical sites there are in America. You know, if you go to Boston, if you go to Pennsylvania, if you go to California, there's so many in Texas. Imagine if those places no longer belong to the state and any private citizen anywhere in the world could purchase them and literally do whatever they want to them. So this is heartbreaking, and it's very accurate, and it's incredibly real for Iran. The Times is actually reporting this, that some of Iran's most historical sites and treasures are going to be part of an online auction on May 22nd. So literally, when you go down this list, like, it's absolutely heartbreaking. The Ministry of Cultural Heritage, Tourism, and Handicrafts is officially putting 19 locations up for sale. Rayan Castle on Kerman is on the list. Are you familiar with Rayan Castle? Okay, so I'm going to go down this list because it was new to me. I had heard of it, but I didn't realize how symbolic it is. This castle is over 1,000 years old. It dates back to the pre-Islamic period, the Sassanid Empire. And it's the second largest adobe structure after the Bam Citadel. So basically, if you look at it, the way it's constructed, you can tell it's like an ancient, not only an ancient Iranian site, but there's only two like it in the world. The other one is, you know, the Bam Citadel, which was, there was an earthquake there, and much of it had been destroyed.
I was actually Googling it as
if you look at
I was about to say, it looks just like BAM. And yeah.
Yeah. So this one, actually, it's funny. I'm going to share that because I saw somebody share some pictures of it. This site is actually, no one's even taking care of it, Iman. Like, that's how little the Islamic regime cares about national monument and historic site. So literally people were walking around and there were pieces of pottery on the ground that are broken. Like, anyone could pick it up and leave. So it's completely unkept. And basically it's up for sale now at this point. And keeping in mind that Iran is one of the richest countries on earth, just to think that they're resorting to selling monuments and land to foreigners, to anyone, to make ends meet is absolutely unacceptable. And it's really sad that no one's stepping in. Bam Citadel is a registered UNESCO site. It's a World Heritage Site. This citadel, this castle, should be on that same list, and it's not. And you have to remember that in some cases there are historic sites that have been purchased and like turned into hotels, turned into luxury spots where people can come and vacation, but there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that the person who's going to purchase this or any of these 19 locations are going to care for it. So between land and historical sites and our people,
are they sharing like the dollar amounts that these things? Oh, I guess we'll find out afterward. We wouldn't know yet. The auction. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. And sad. Okay. What about updates about protesters and detainees? I feel like this list is going to be too long, but go ahead.
It keeps getting longer, and we say this every single week when we talk about the individuals who are taken in. By no means do we want to say that this is a complete list, and by no means do we want to say that we know every single individuals. We would love for you to share them with us. If you DM at Let's Unite and Conquer, if you DM Iman or myself, we'll make sure to highlight these individuals because it has become personal. We mentioned this story last week, and we're not going to mince words. I'm not going to just, the people whose stories that we know, we're going to do our best to highlight them because saying their names will save their lives. And we ask you to also take a moment to take in these individuals because they're not just names. They're individuals who are suffering for absolutely no reason. And in the case of Hushidar Zari, we spoke about him last week. He's a family member of one of our uniters, Shiva Sabir, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. I asked her for an update and there are none. They keep delaying his, basically they're supposed to appear like some kind of public hearing of some kind or even a private hearing, and they've continually delayed it, and he's been denied access to his family. It's terrifying. So just a bit of background on him. Hushidar was a judo coach at the highest level. He was set to appear at the Olympics in Australia. He was taken off the flight by the Islamic regime simply because he's Baha'i. Baha'i are a religious group, are an ancient part of our nation, but they are completely discriminated against by the Islamic regime. So he's been denied so many things, including practicing, his sport of choice, all the way to all these limitations when it comes to his business. So let's please use the hashtag Free Hushida to get his story out there and to keep speaking about him. Another member of the Baha'i community who was arrested, his name is Afif Naimi. He was arrested by security forces while he was on vacation. He's being held on $100,000 US bail. So that's another insane story. A positive story that came out this week is Navid Afkari's father. He was released from prison. He was arrested on May 2nd for absolutely no reason. For those who don't know, Navid Afkari was a wrestler, an Iranian wrestler. He was arrested in 2008, accused of killing a member of the Islamic regime security force. His two brothers were taken in. Navid was executed in 2020. His brothers are serving long sentences. His sister was arrested, I believe it was in November last year. Yeah, last November, along with her toddler. So this family has suffered an incredible amount. They're also under pressure. They're being threatened to not speak publicly. And that's why we believe that the father was arrested. Thankfully, he was released, but he was kept in prison along with criminals. Like this poor senior citizen whose children are all in jail is also suffering like this. It's absolutely unreal.
What are the action items this week and what hashtags?
IRGC terrorists, we're going to keep using that hashtag, and obviously save Sharmad, Jamshid Sharmad, who is under threat of execution as well. Hashtag Salman Yassin, he appeared before a court on the 8th. We don't have further details on what happened to him. He's an Iranian Kurdish rapper. Speaking of Iranian rappers, Tumaj Salehi, let's please not forget his hashtags. And also Ednaz Mohammadi, Nilufar Hamidi, will say their names every week. They're two of the reporters who helped break the story about Mahsa Amini, and of course Mahsa Amini and Iran Revolution. Let's please continue using these hashtags.
And your final message to our listeners?
Let's lighten it up. This was a very serious and somber, like, not that it's not every week, but there was really no bright points. But let's remember that our language is called Persian. It has a name. It's in English, it's Persian. And the name for our language in Persian is Farsi. And in other languages, do you speak any other languages? How do you say Persian in German? There you go. So if you're speaking in German, you wouldn't insert the word Farsi.
It would have been disastrous if I would not have known that. 10 years in Germany, and you would have put me on this spot, and then Avrumirat, you know. But yeah. But in Spanish, they would say, how do you say it in Spanish? If I was speaking in Spanish, yo hablo Irani? I have no idea, actually. Maybe Mona would know. Excuse me. Yeah.
Maybe. But yeah, we can't keep using Farsi in every language we speak. Like in French, you say je parle le perse. You don't say je parle Farsi.
Well,
let's just use the language correctly. It's part of not erasing.
Oh, how beautiful. I like how you say it in Spanish. Very cool. Although it seems like Andy is saying Irani. I don't know where that's coming from. En español es persa. Anyways, we got to stay on schedule. Parishan, as always, we appreciate you spending so much time and doing your due diligence. It's all tough news that you have to constantly scatter through and just kind of like organize for us. And so we really appreciate everything you do. So have a wonderful rest of the evening, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I go, I just want to answer this question from RMAP127. It says, why the Iranian lawyers and also Prince Reza not doing something about this legally, that if selling of Iranian land happens is illegal and will not be acceptable and after the revolution victory? I guess I understand what you're saying, but no one is the owner of the land. The Islamic regime is responsible for the land and legally allowed to do what they want with the land. And especially the locations that they're selling are not UNESCO World Heritage Site and not under international jurisdiction or review. So there's really no recourse.
Thank you so much.
That's the
all right, Aziz. Bye-bye.
Khudafis.